Daniel never expected that a simple act of rescue would completely upend his life. On a bitterly cold night, while walking home, he stumbled upon a tiny, shivering puppy left all alone by the roadside, frail, vulnerable, and struggling to stay alive. Convinced that destiny had guided the pup to him, he took it with him, confident he had rescued a defenseless creature. However, by the very next morning, Daniel's sense of relief gave way to astonishment. The puppy behaved unlike any ordinary dog. It moved with remarkable precision, fixed him with intelligent, luminous eyes, and displayed instincts far beyond those of an ordinary young dog. What Daniel discovered next would shake him deeply and stun everyone who heard the story. The night was still and silent, enveloping the neighborhood in a peaceful hush. Daniel walked slowly beneath the faint glow of streetlights, hands buried deep inside his jacket pockets. The day had dragged on, marked by dull work and endless routine. He had no inkling that his world was about to be transformed completely. As he rounded the corner near the old wooden fence, a faint sound caught his attention. It wasn't the rustling of leaves nor the distant drone of traffic. It was softer, weaker, almost a plea. Daniel stopped in his tracks, listening intently. There it was again, a tiny, high-pitched whimper filled with desperation, as though begging for help. His heart raced. He moved cautiously toward the noise, scanning the shadows carefully. At first he noticed only grass and fractured pavement. Then he spotted it, a small figure curled up against the biting cold. Daniel knelt down, his breath hitching in his throat. A tiny puppy, no larger than the size of Daniel's palm, shook violently with its fragile body. The little animal raised its head, and their eyes locked. Its glossy, tear-filled eyes mirrored the streetlight, silently pleading for comfort. Daniel's chest tightened. For a long moment, he stood motionless, caught between surprise and worry. He scanned the street, hoping to find an owner or a mother dog nearby. But the night was deserted. No footsteps, no voices, no moving shadows. The faint whimpers filled the silence, tugging at his heart. "Hey there, little one," Daniel whispered gently. He slowly reached out his hand, careful not to frighten the trembling puppy. After a moment's hesitation, the pup pressed its cold, damp nose against his palm. In that delicate touch, Daniel sensed a quiet cry. "Don't leave me." His throat tightened. The puppy attempted to move closer but weakly collapsed onto the grass. A surge of alarm swept through Daniel. He could not simply walk away. The creature was far too fragile and weak to survive the night alone. Cradling the pup, he was surprised by how light it felt, as though it were merely fur and bones. Holding it close to his chest, he felt the faint flutter of its heartbeat. "It's all right," he whispered softly. "I've got you now." The puppy whimpered again but did not resist. Instead, it nestled its head into his jacket, clinging to the warmth. Daniel glanced around once more, scanning for any sign this little one had an owner. But the street remained eerily quiet. The only noise was the faint murmur of the distant city, while there was no collar, no leash, and no indication of where the creature had come from. One thing Daniel was sure of: if he left the puppy there, it wouldn't survive until morning. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted his hold. "All right," he murmured softly. "You're coming home with me." With cautious steps, he headed towards his apartment, carrying more than just a helpless puppy. He carried a promise he couldn't yet fully grasp. The return journey felt different somehow. Every few strides, Daniel glanced down at the tiny bundle in his arms. The puppy, Its little body pressed close against him, gradually stopped trembling as the warmth of his jacket wrapped around it. Its eyes slowly closed, yet a small paw weakly clung to his sleeve, seemingly afraid he would let go. Daniel's heart felt full in a way it hadn't for many years. It was a strange sensation. This delicate life, found purely by chance, now completely reliant on him. Despite the sudden responsibility, it didn't weigh heavily on him. Instead, it felt wholly right. Stopping at his door, Daniel gently cradled the dozing puppy for a few more moments. Outside, the world remained cold and dark. But inside awaited warmth and comfort. As he unlocked the door and stepped into the familiar confines of his apartment, he sensed instinctively that nothing would ever be quite the same again. This was not merely an encounter with a stray animal. It marked the start of something truly remarkable. The following day, he would come to realize just how extraordinary this moment really was. Daniel closed the door behind him, the soft click reverberating through the tranquil apartment, the cozy warmth contrasting starkly with the chilly night beyond. Carefully placing his keys on the countertop, he continued to hold the tiny bundle close to his chest. The puppy shifted slightly, a faint whimper piercing the quiet. Daniel felt his heart melt. "It's all right," he murmured softly. "You're safe here now." For a brief moment, he stood motionless, overwhelmed by the delicate trust this little creature had bestowed upon him. Bringing a dog home wasn't part of his plan, but life had just altered his course unexpectedly. Tenderly, he laid the puppy down on the sofa, smoothing a blanket beneath it. Against the large cushions, the small puppy seemed incredibly fragile, its little chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Crouching beside the animal, Daniel frowned as he took in its thin frame. Hunger, fatigue, and neglect were evident in the way the pup trembled even in sleep. Rising, Daniel quickly headed to the kitchen, rummaging through cupboards and the refrigerator. Unsurprisingly, there was no dog food available. The best he could prepare was a bowl filled with milk and some pieces of bread. He carefully set the bowl on the floor. Initially, the puppy didn't respond, either too weak or too frightened to move. Daniel dipped his finger in the milk and held it near the pup's nose. Gradually, it lifted its head, sniffed cautiously, and then licked. Feeling encouraged, Daniel gently brought the puppy closer to the bowl, and soon it was eagerly lapping up the milk. Watching the puppy drink, relief flooded over him, each small sip a step closer to recovery. When the pup finally stopped, Daniel noticed tiny droplets of milk clinging to its whiskers. For the first time that evening, he smiled, grabbing a tissue to softly wipe the little face clean. "Good boy," he whispered, uncertain if the pup was male or female. After feeding, the little one curled up in the blanket and let out a soft sigh that pulled at Daniel's heart. He sat nearby on the floor, elbows resting on his knees, simply observing. The way the tiny paws twitched during sleep made him smile. Yet, there was something more, a subtle weight that hung quietly in the room. Leaning closer, he examined the small creature. Its fur was darker than he had expected, a deep jet black with an unusual shine that shimmered oddly in the light. And those eyes, when they had looked up at him earlier, seemed too expressive for such a tiny being. As the chill of the night deepened, Daniel understood he needed to prepare a proper sleeping spot. He retrieved an old towel and pillow from the closet, arranging them near the heater. Gently, he lifted the pup and placed it down, but almost immediately, a faint, desperate whine escaped. Daniel frowned. "You don't like it there?" he asked gently. The puppy wobbled, crawling back toward him, dragging the blanket with its small paws. Daniel's heart tightened. "You want to stay with me, don't you?" He lifted the pup once more, settling it beside him on the couch. The whining ceased at once. Hours passed as Daniel drifted into light sleep, the pup nestled closely against his side. Each time he shifted, he marveled at how calm the little creature became at his touch, as if his presence was its protector. Around midnight, he carried the pup into his bedroom, intending to place it at the foot of the bed. As he settled down, a gentle scratching against his arm caught his attention. He opened his eyes to find the puppy climbing upward, determined to reach the bend of his arm. Daniel smiled softly. "You're quite persistent for someone so tiny." Carefully, he scooped the pup up and nestled it beside him. Almost immediately, the puppy's breathing slowed, easing into a calm, rhythmic sleep. However, something unexpected occurred. In the dimly lit room, illuminated only by the pale glow of a street lamp outside, Daniel noticed the puppy's eyes flicker open briefly. For a fleeting moment, they appeared to shimmer subtly, reflecting a light that wasn't really there. He blinked, unsure if tiredness was distorting his perception. When he looked again, the pup's eyes were shut, and its small body was curled peacefully against his chest. He sighed, shaking his head. "I must be imagining things," he murmured. Yet, a lingering unease prickled at the edges of his thoughts. By morning, Daniel awoke to the warmth of the puppy pressed against his cheek. During the night, the little dog had snuggled onto the pillow, pressing close as if standing guard. He smiled faintly and scratched behind its ears. "Seems like you've already made yourself at home." The puppy yawned and gently nudged his chin with its nose. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a sensation awaken within him, something beyond mere obligation or habit. It was hope, though he didn't understand why fate had led him to that street the previous night. He knew one thing clearly. This tiny creature was meant to be part of his life. Golden beams of sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting warm stripes across Daniel's bedroom as the new day began. Daniel awakened gradually, blinking against the gentle morning light. For a brief moment, he felt confused until the events of the previous night came rushing back. His gaze drifted toward the pillow beside him, where the tiny puppy was curled up like a small ball. Its fur glistened softly in the dawn's glow, and its little chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm. A smile spread across Daniel's face. The delicate creature he had saved now appeared utterly serene, as though all the fears of the night had vanished. After stretching, Daniel carefully slipped out of bed, making sure not to disturb the little pup. He headed toward the kitchen, planning to prepare some breakfast. The sound of his footsteps seemed to rouse the puppy, since a faint pattering noise soon followed him. He turned around and stood frozen in surprise. There it was, wobbling determinedly down the hallway on its tiny legs. Daniel's brow furrowed in astonishment. "How did you manage to get down?" he whispered softly. He was certain he had placed the puppy high up on the bed, far out of reach for a small creature unable to safely jump. Yet there it was, trotting steadily toward him with surprising confidence. In the kitchen, Daniel set a shallow bowl filled with milk on the floor, expecting the puppy to clumsily struggle as most young pups did. Instead, he watched in disbelief as the dog approached with care, sniffed the milk, and then began drinking with flawless control. No splashing, no mess, no frantic gulping. Each lick of the tongue was precise, deliberate, and measured. Daniel crouched down to observe more closely. "You're different," he murmured. The puppy lifted its eyes to meet his gaze, its shiny eyes locking onto his. for a fleeting moment. Daniel was certain there was something profound behind them, an intelligence far beyond mere instinct. The day brought even more unusual moments. While Daniel was seated at his desk, sipping his coffee, something in the corner of his vision caught his attention. The puppy had managed to clamber onto the couch, an ability Daniel hadn't taught him yet and hadn't expected him to have. Setting his mug down, he got up to investigate. Sure enough, the little dog was settled on the cushion, gazing out the window with a quiet intensity, appearing to observe rather than simply exist. When Daniel drew closer, the puppy turned its head to meet his eyes once more. That look unsettled him, not from fear, but because it seemed oddly perceptive. Later that morning, as Daniel jotted down notes in his journal, he accidentally dropped his pen. It rolled out of reach beneath the coffee table. Before he could kneel to grab it, the puppy ambled over, pawed at the pen, and pushed it forward until it came back into the open. Daniel blinked in surprise and laughed nervously. "Did you just help me?" he asked. The pup cocked its head as if responding to the question, then settled down at his feet. Daniel sank back into his chair, a chill running down his spine. Puppies simply didn't behave this way, not at such a young age nor with this kind of awareness. As the day wore on, that sensation only intensified. Every movement, glance, and sound from the tiny creature seemed meaningful. Unlike most energetic young dogs, this one was calm and intentional, almost as if he was studying Daniel and choosing him in return. Daniel found himself talking aloud more frequently, narrating his thoughts while cooking or tidying up. Instead of barking, the puppy would respond with a calm, unwavering stare or a gentle paw nudge. Somehow, Daniel felt truly understood. That evening, as he sat on the sofa, the pup nestled close to him again. He softly ran his fingers through its fur, lost in his thoughts. "What are you?" he murmured quietly. His tone held no fear, only curiosity. He had initially intended to save a helpless stray. Yet by the second day, he realized the reality was far more complex. This was no ordinary lost dog. There was something unusual about it. Although he couldn't yet pinpoint exactly what, Daniel was sure of one thing. His life was now inseparably linked to this tiny being. Over the following days, Daniel's apartment ceased to be a silent, empty space. The puppy had filled it with a tangible presence, quiet, observant, but profoundly alive. Unlike other young dogs, it seldom barked or whimpered. Instead, its body language, expressive eyes, and the way it stayed near him served as its unique form of communication. Daniel found himself speaking aloud constantly, laughing at how natural it all felt. "You're the best listener I've ever had," he joked one evening. To his amazement, the puppy wagged its little tail as if it truly understood. These small, intriguing moments kept accumulating. Daniel noticed that whenever he was about to rise from the couch, the pup would often anticipate the movement, hopping down to the floor before he even stirred. His phone's ring was always foreshadowed by the pup's restless stirring seconds beforehand, as though it sensed the vibrations before sound reached the room. One morning, as Daniel was brewing his coffee, he noticed the puppy already sitting patiently by the door, waiting, before Daniel had even decided to take it out for a walk. These moments felt anything but coincidental. The timing was uncanny, remarkably precise. On a particularly cold morning, bundled up with a scarf, Daniel stepped outside and saw his neighbor Mrs. Coleman tending to her plants. She immediately spotted the puppy and exclaimed, "Oh, Daniel, where did you find that little one?" He recounted briefly how he had found the pup abandoned on the street. Mrs. Coleman knelt down, hoping to entice the puppy toward her. To Daniel's surprise, the little dog recoiled and hid behind his leg, its eyes fixed unwaveringly on Mrs. Coleman with an intense, unblinking stare. Mrs. Coleman rose slowly, a frown crossing her face. "Usually, strange puppies warm up to me." Forcing a smile, she remarked, "Well, it seems he's very attached to you." Her words stayed with Daniel long after she had gone. He realized she was right. The puppy showed no interest in anyone else, whether at the park or on the street. It ignored every passerby and every kind gesture. But with Daniel, their connection was different, exclusive, almost possessive. At night, the puppy insisted on curling up against him, pressing its small body tightly into his chest, as if fearing he might vanish. It wasn't mere fondness. It was a profound trust that felt almost supernatural. Daniel began to wonder if the puppy had chosen him for a deeper reason. The feeling of mystery only grew more intense one afternoon as Daniel worked on his laptop. Deeply engrossed in a crucial report, he muttered in irritation, "I need my pen." Unaware he had voiced his thoughts aloud, his gaze lifted to find the puppy gently pushing the pen across the desk with its nose. Daniel froze, his hands hovering hesitantly above the keyboard. "No way," he breathed softly. The little dog looked up at him, tail wagging quietly. Had it just responded? His heartbeat quickened. The atmosphere in the room seemed denser, as if burdened with an unseen presence. For a brief moment, Daniel was convinced it wasn't simply his imagination. That night, restless sleep plagued him. In his dream, the puppy stood at the forest's shadowy edge, its eyes glowing intensely through the darkness. From the distance came an eerie sound, a blend of a low growl and a whisper, beckoning him onward. Upon waking, his pulse thundered in his chest, sweat moistening his brow. Turning over, he caught the pup's steady gaze. As if it fully understood the vision he had just experienced. Swallowing hard, a deep sense of unease settled within him. "It was just a dream," he murmured, though part of him remained skeptical. Yet the connection between them only deepened. Every day, Daniel took the puppy to the park, where it moved with an extraordinary grace, effortlessly dodging obstacles as if it possessed unearthly agility. Bystanders took notice. A teenager filming on his phone whispered, "That's the smartest puppy I've ever seen." A jogger slowed his pace, eyes narrowed with curiosity. Uneasy, Daniel gave the leash a gentle tug, silently urging them to look away. He did not want the spotlight. He feared anyone else might discover what he was beginning to realize. This was no ordinary dog. That evening, with city lights twinkling far beyond the window, the pup nestled itself on Daniel's lap, resting its head softly against his chest. He gently ran his hand through the creature's fur, whispering softly, "You're not just an ordinary dog, are you?" The small animal pressed a paw against his arm, the very same gesture it had made on their first night together. Daniel felt a tightness in his throat. Whatever this being truly was, it belonged to him now. No matter how bizarre the clues became, or how many questions remained unanswered, one thing was absolutely clear to him. He would never let it go. The evening had begun with quiet tranquility. Daniel sat comfortably on the sofa. The puppy curled up against his leg as the television hummed softly in the background. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, shaking loose branches that scraped against the windows. It seemed like just another ordinary, peaceful night. But the calm was not destined to last. Suddenly, raised voices outside the apartment shattered the silence. Daniel quickly muted the TV, his brow knitting with concern. At first, it sounded like neighbors having a heated argument. Then, a sharp metallic clang cut through the air, the unmistakable sound of a trash can being knocked over. His heart rate spiked, signaling something was wrong. Immediately, Lucky, a name Daniel had given the little dog, lifted his head. His ears twitched, eyes narrowing with an intense focus that caught Daniel off guard. Before he could rise from the couch, Lucky sprang to his feet and positioned himself protectively between Daniel and the door. The small dog's body tensed, and a deep, low growl rumbled up from his chest. Daniel blinked, stunned. That growl was unlike anything he had heard from the pup before. It was deep, powerful, resonating through the air and filling the room with such a force that his stomach twisted with unease. The sudden, forceful pounding at the door startled Daniel, causing his heart to race wildly in his chest. "Who's there?" he called out, but only silence answered him. The knocking escalated into furious banging. Lai's low growl intensified, resonating throughout the apartment like an ominous signal. With trembling hands, Daniel reached for his phone, but before he could make a call, a heavy kick slammed against the door with brutal force. Panic surged through him. Someone was attempting to break inside. The wood splintered, the lock gave way, and the door flew open with a deafening crash. Two men, faces obscured by hoods, burst into the room. One gripped a crowbar, the other brandished a knife that caught the faint glow of the television. Daniel stood frozen, overwhelmed by fear. Suddenly, Lucky sprang into action, moving with a speed that seemed impossible. His small black form blurred as he lunged forward, his growl transforming into a fierce snarl that caused both intruders to stagger. The man wielding the knife swung wildly, but Lucky was quicker. The dog leapt up, snapping his jaws mere inches from the attacker's wrist, forcing him to drop the blade with a startled cry. The knife clattered across the floor, spinning to a halt beneath the table. The second intruder raised the crowbar, but Lucky agilely dodged, weaving around him in a swift, fluid motion. His eyes gleamed with an almost supernatural intensity, locking onto the man. For a brief instant, the intruder hesitated, his confidence shaken by that unsettling gaze. Daniel remained rooted to the spot, watching in a mix of wonder and disbelief. This was no clumsy, frightened pup defending his home. This was a carefully crafted tactic. Lucky moved with deliberate accuracy, predicting each attack and forcing the men backward, step by step. His growls filled the room, deeper and louder than his small size would suggest, echoing off the walls like distant thunder. The intruders exchanged frightened looks, their confidence crumbling into outright fear. "What the hell is that thing?" one of them shouted, his voice shaking. "Forget it. Let's get out of here." Within moments, they fled, tripping over one another as they hurried through the shattered door. Their footsteps faded down the hallway until silence settled back into the apartment. Lucky remained standing at the doorway, chest rising and falling heavily, his eyes still faintly glowing in the low light. Gradually, his growling ceased, replaced by a serene calm. He then turned toward Daniel, padding quietly across the floor as if nothing had occurred. With a soft whimper, he leapt into Daniel's trembling arms and pressed his head against Daniel's chest. Daniel's heart thudded loudly as he held the small creature close. His mind raced, replaying the unbelievable scene on repeat. A puppy had disarmed a knife, confronted armed intruders, and sent them fleeing in terror. No ordinary pet could have done that. Daniel swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he whispered, "You saved me." His voice cracked, thick with emotion. Lucky lifted his head and gently licked Daniel's hand, his eyes now tender once more. Daniel sank back onto the couch, the weight of reality pressing down heavily on him. The door hung askew on its broken hinges, while the knife gleamed faintly beneath the table. Despite the chaos in his mind, Daniel's attention remained locked on the warm body nestled in his arms. He still had no understanding of what Lucky truly was. However, the events of the night had revealed one undeniable fact. This was far more than a simple puppy rescued from the streets. Lucky was something rare, extraordinary, defying explanation. Though a mixture of fear and wonder churned inside him, one reality stood out above all else. He could never let Lucky go. That night, sleep eluded Daniel. Even after the police arrived, collected statements, and departed with assurances of a thorough investigation, his thoughts remained consumed by one thing: the puppy. Lucky lay curled beside him on the couch, breathing smoothly as if nothing had occurred. Yet Daniel could not shake the vivid memories, the glowing eyes, the eerie growl, and the astonishing speed with which Lucky had subdued two grown men. No matter how often he replayed the scene in his mind, the truth was inescapable. This was no ordinary dog. Though fear whispered warnings, curiosity pulled just as strongly. Daniel needed answers, even if they frightened him. The following morning, he carefully placed Lucky into a carrier and headed straight for the veterinary clinic. The waiting area was alive with activity, dogs barking, cats hissing, and children tugging impatiently on leashes. Throughout it all, Lucky remained quiet, his wide eyes calmly observing the surroundings. At one point, a large German shepherd barked aggressively at him. Instead of retreating, Lucky met the challenge with a steady gaze. Within moments, the shepherd whimpered and turned away, straining against its leash to escape the stare. Murmurs rippled among the other pet owners, some curious, others visibly unsettled. Daniel shifted uneasily in his seat, wishing the unwanted attention would fade away. When their turn arrived, Dr. Collins, an experienced veterinarian with gentle, reassuring eyes, welcomed Daniel warmly. "Is this the little one you rescued?" she inquired, carefully lifting Lucky onto the examination table. Daniel gave a hesitant nod. "Yes, but he's different from other puppies," he admitted, unsure about how much to disclose. Dr. Collins smiled kindly. "Let's take a closer look." She started with the basics: ears, eyes, and teeth. Her eyebrows knitted together when inspecting his mouth. These canines are sharper than usual, almost like a predator's." She concealed her concern behind a warm smile, although Daniel noticed. Next, she placed the stethoscope on Lucky's chest, her eyes widening. "His heartbeat is strong. Very strong. Much stronger than I'd expect for a dog his size." Moving to his legs, she gently stretched them. "Incredible flexibility," she murmured, noting the unusually firm muscles. Pausing to jot down notes, her expression became serious. "I've never encountered a puppy like this before." Daniel's chest tightened with worry. "Is something wrong with him?" he asked nervously. Dr. Collins shook her head slowly. "Not wrong, just different. He might have some wolf ancestry or a hybrid background, but even that doesn't explain everything." Daniel hesitated, then decided to be truthful. He stopped a break-in last night. 2 men, one wielding a knife. He fought them off. Dr. Collins blinked in surprise at such a small puppy. Daniel nodded, his voice cracking. He acted like he instinctively knew what to do. His growl was so deep it froze them in place. And his eyes, they were glowing. An intense silence descended over the room. Dr. Collins carefully set her pen down and fixed her gaze on Lucky with a newfound seriousness. "That's not typical," she murmured, almost to herself, "and it's not something science can easily unravel." Leaning in, she tenderly stroked Lucky's fur. "Sometimes animals harbor mysteries beyond our understanding. Whether you call it instinct, evolution, or something else entirely, this little one has formed a bond with you like nothing I've ever seen before. You're more than his owner, Daniel. You're his anchor." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat as he met Lucky's unwavering, penetrating stare. The dog pressed a small paw against his hand, a familiar touch that seemed to silently say, "You belong to me, as I belong to you." On the drive home, Daniel's mind whirled with Dr. Collins's cryptic remarks. Wolf, ancestry, evolution, something more. None of it fully captured what he had witnessed. Still, as Lucky sat quietly beside him, eyes locked onto his with a loyalty that transcended words, Daniel realized that uncovering explanations mattered less than the undeniable truth before him. This little companion had chosen him, protected him, and remained faithfully by his side. "No matter what the reason, I can't let fear cloud what's real," Daniel whispered, reaching over to run his hand through Lucky's fur. "Whatever you are, you're family now. Ibado." In the days following the vet visit, Daniel tried to convince himself life might return to normal. He told himself Lucky was merely an extraordinary puppy, stronger, smarter than most. Yet, each time he met those radiant eyes or recalled that low, resonant growl, he knew deep down the truth was far more complex. He was far from ordinary, yet Daniel clung to their familiar habits, quiet dinners, late-night strolls, and evenings spent in front of the television. Beneath the surface, however, he sensed it, a looming tempest. When it arrived, everything would be irrevocably altered. On a crisp evening, the storm eventually erupted. Daniel had taken Lucky for a walk in the park, with the last light of day fading into the horizon. The air carried the scent of fallen autumn leaves, and the soft crunch of his boots echoed through the open space. Lucky trotted ahead, ears alert, his small body attentive to every noise. Daniel offered a faint smile, thankful for the company. For the first time in many years, he no longer felt isolated. Suddenly the moment shattered as a low growl emanated from the shadowy trees. Daniel froze, his eyes sweeping the darkness. Out of the gloom appeared 3 stray dogs, thin and famished, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. They quickly fanned out, encircling Daniel and Lucky. His heart pounded wildly. Daniel tightened his grip on the leash, his voice trembling as he warned, "Stay back." But his words lacked force. The biggest stray growled fiercely, teeth bared, edging closer. Anxiety gripped Daniel's chest. He attempted to lift Lucky into his arms, but the puppy resisted, stepping forward with a boldness that sent chills down Daniel's spine. The little dog stiffened, fur bristling, emitting a deep growl that belied his small size. Surprised, the stray dogs hesitated. Then, one lunged forward. Daniel cried out in fear, but Lucky was already reacting. He moved like a shadow, darting with lightning-fast speed. His small frame collided with the lunging dog, a guttural snarl tearing through the night air. The larger canine yelped in surprise and staggered backward, stunned by the ferocity of the tiny opponent. The other strays hesitated, their confidence faltering as Lucky circled them. His glowing eyes locked onto theirs with an eerie, intense focus. Daniel's breath hitched. This wasn't a mere puppy defending itself. This was a predator wearing a disguise. Another stray barked and lunged forward, but Lucky effortlessly sidestepped, responding with a growl so fierce that the dog immediately retreated, tail tucked between its legs. The third beast didn't even bother trying, their resolve shattered under Lucky's intimidating stare. Moments later, the pack disbanded, retreating into the woods while whining softly as shadows swallowed them whole. Silence returned to the park, broken only by Daniel's ragged breaths. He remained rooted to the spot, heart hammering, struggling to comprehend what he had just seen. Meanwhile, Lucky walked back calmly, his tail wagging slightly, as if nothing out of the ordinary had taken place. He pressed affectionately against Daniel's leg, his eyes now soft and no longer glowing. Daniel sank onto a nearby bench, burying his face in his hands. His body trembled with a mix of adrenaline, fear, and wonder. "That was impossible," he whispered. Looking down, he saw Lucky jump up beside him, gazing up with quiet trust. Gently, Daniel stroked his fur with shaking hands. "What are you?" he asked, voice cracking. But the puppy only snuggled closer, laying a paw comforting on his arm. The familiar sign that had grown to signify everything. That night, back in his apartment, Daniel lay awake well after Lucky had drifted off to sleep beside him. He replayed the scene repeatedly, each detail engraving itself more deeply into his thoughts. He could no longer convince himself it was mere chance or instinct. Lucky wasn't just special. He was extraordinary, something beyond explanation. Although fear gnawed at him, love held him firmly in place. In the darkness, Daniel whispered with fierce determination, "No matter what you are, I will always protect you." The morning following the incident at the park found Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched. Lucky rested at his feet, curled up tightly in a small ball. Daniel's mind continued to revisit the confrontation with the stray dogs, the glowing eyes, impossible speed, and how a whole pack had scattered before something so small. He could no longer deny it to himself. Lucky was far from ordinary. Yet the thought that others might notice stirred a knot of anxiety deep within him. Secrets of this magnitude never remained concealed forever. That fear materialized sooner than Daniel had anticipated. On their next walk, he became aware of people staring. A jogger slowed as they approached, furrowing his brow in suspicion. Lucky moved gracefully beside Daniel, his fluid, precise motion unusual for such a young dog. "That's one impressive dog you've got there," the jogger remarked, his tone tinged with doubt. Daniel forced a smile and lightly tightened the leash. "Just Lucky," he replied, fully aware of the irony in his words. As the man jogged away, Daniel noticed him glancing back repeatedly. Later that day, Daniel took Lucky to the nearby small park close to his apartment. A group of children playing soccer suddenly came to a stop when they caught sight of Lucky. One boy pointed out, "Look at his eyes, they're shining." The others giggled uneasily, but when Lucky turned his gaze toward them, their laughter quickly faded into silence. A girl tugged on her friend's sleeve. "He's sort of scary." Daniel felt a pang of sadness. He gently lifted Lucky into his arms, murmuring, "It's time to head home." As they left, Daniel sensed the lingering weight of their stares burning into his back. Back at the apartment, nervous energy made him pace the living room. He was painfully aware that it was only a matter of time before those whispers turned into direct questions. What would happen if someone recorded Lucky, uploaded the video online, or worse, reported him to the authorities? The world was not kind to the mysterious. It sought to analyze, confine, and fear it. Looking down at Lucky, who sat calmly on the couch with his eyes faintly glowing in the dim light, Daniel whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. "They don't understand you, but I do, and I will protect you from anyone who tries to take you away." That night, Daniel experienced another vivid dream. He saw Lucky standing at the edge of a vast forest, his glowing eyes piercing the darkness. Strange murmurs filled the air, words that Daniel couldn't quite grasp. Awakening with his heart pounding, he found Lucky staring directly at him, as though sharing the dream. For the first time, Daniel wondered if the connection between them was deeper than mere companionship. Perhaps this was more than just a dog with extraordinary abilities. Maybe fate itself had woven their destinies together. The next day, Dr. Collins called with the results from Lai's additional tests. Her tone was careful and measured. "Daniel, I can't explain this. His DNA doesn't correspond to any recognized domestic breed. There are genetic markers, anomalies I've never encountered before. Honestly, if I didn't know better, I'd say he's something completely new." Daniel's fingers clenched the phone tighter. "New?" The veterinarian hesitated before continuing. "You have to be cautious. If word gets out, people will want to study him. They won't see him as a pet. They'll view him as a scientific specimen." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest, a storm of fear mixed with anger. He looked down at Lucky, who gently placed a paw on his arm, the same comforting gesture he had offered since their first night together. "No," Daniel said fiercely into the phone. "He is not an experiment. He's mine, and I will protect him with everything I have." After hanging up, Daniel knelt beside Lucky and rested his face against the puppy's soft fur. "Whatever you really are," he whispered, "I will keep you safe." "That's my promise." The coming days passed like a haze of uneasiness for Daniel. Whenever he took Lucky outside, he felt the intense scrutiny of others. Whether it was the jogger who whispered behind their breath, the children who pointed with wide eyes, or complete strangers on the street. Everyone seemed to sense something unusual about his companion. At night, Daniel found himself gazing at the ceiling, haunted by Dr. Collins's warning. If others discover him, they will want to study him. The mere thought of losing Lucky to a cold, sterile laboratory filled Daniel's stomach with knotting dread. He refused to allow that outcome. Yet fear wasn't his sole motivation. Love, pure, unexpected, and undeniable, also propelled him forward. Each time Lucky nestled against his chest or rested a paw on his arm, Daniel's worries subsided. This was far more than just a pet. This was family. And family isn't abandoned when challenges arise. One evening, as Daniel sat on the couch with Lucky comfortably curled in his lap, he whispered softly, "People might call you strange or different, but to me, you're perfect." The puppy's glowing eyes softened, and he snuggled closer, as if silently promising to uphold that bond. That weekend, Marcus, Daniel's oldest friend, paid a visit. He glanced at Lucky with evident suspicion. "You know this isn't normal, right?" Marcus said, folding his arms. "Dogs don't stare like that. They don't behave like that. And those eyes, I don't know what he is." "But he's not safe." Daniel tensed, holding Lucky protectively. "Not safe for who?" "He saved me, twice, Marcus. You weren't there. You didn't see it." Marcus shook his head. "I'm just saying, be cautious. Someone's bound to notice eventually, and then you'll lose him." After Marcus left, Daniel sat quietly, his hands trembling as he gently stroked Lucky's fur. His friend's words echoed in his mind, but rather than fear, they stirred a different feeling inside him: determination. He met Lucky's steady gaze and said firmly, "They don't see you the way I do. They fear what they don't understand." but I know you. I trust you, and I won't let anyone take you away." Lucky nestled further into Daniel's chest, emitting a low, calming sound that felt like reassurance. From that instant onward, Daniel ceased living in fear. He chose to be deliberate about the life they shared. Their strolls became shorter, and the places they settled were selected with intention, not out of guilt, but out of a desire to protect. He rearranged his living space, creating a special nook just for Lucky, cozy and inviting, filled with soft blankets, toys, and warmth. Daniel spoke to Lucky constantly, not as one would address an animal, but as one would converse with a close friend or partner. Each time, Lucky seemed to comprehend, responding with subtle gestures that held deeper meaning than words could convey. One evening, as the rain tapped gently against the windows, Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor, Lucky curled comfortably in his lap. He ran his fingers through the pup's dark coat, his voice thick with feeling. "You may not be ordinary. You might not even be what the world calls a dog. But to me, you mean everything. You're my family, my guardian, my companion. I thought I rescued you that night on the street, but the truth is, you saved me." Lucky lifted his head and nuzzled his nose softly against Daniel's chin, silently affirming those words. Daniel exhaled deeply, eyes closing in quiet resolve. He had made his decision. No matter what dangers lay ahead, or the questions left unanswered, his love for Lucky outweighed all fear. He wouldn't conceal him out of shame. Instead, he would protect him fiercely from the outside world. In that serene moment, Daniel grasped something profound. The extraordinary did not need explaining. It only needed to be treasured. And that was exactly what he intended to do. Weeks went by, and Daniel's life settled into a rhythm he had never experienced before. Once marked by emptiness and monotony, Daniel's days now brimmed with warmth and meaning. Lucky was always there, waiting patiently by the door when Daniel arrived home, curling up on his pillow each night, and trailing quietly from one room to another, steadfast and loyal. Though the outside world remained unpredictable, filled with uncertainty and unspoken questions, Daniel's apartment became a sanctuary. More than just calm, it was a place overflowing with love. He came to understand that the tiny creature he had rescued from that shadowy street had filled a gap he hadn't even realized was there. Ordinary moments transformed into something extraordinary with Lucky nearby. Morning coffee ceased to be a solitary affair. Instead, it was shared with a furry companion perched on the counter, ears twitching attentively as if absorbing every word. Walks in the park stopped being mere exercise. They turned into little adventures, each footstep reinforcing the connection they had nurtured. Nighttime no longer intimidated Daniel. The silence was now a comfort. It was accompanied by Lucky's steady breathing, a rhythmic reminder that he was no longer alone. The fear that once lurked in his heart had been replaced by gratitude. Even amidst the comforting predictability of his daily routine, Daniel never forgot what Lucky had done. When intruders were chased away, and the stray dog placed his paw multiple times on Daniel's arm, it wasn't just the behavior of a pet. It was the gesture of a guardian, a companion, perhaps something beyond ordinary understanding. Daniel ceased questioning what Lucky was and instead focused on who he truly was, the one who had chosen Daniel and, in doing so, forever changed the course of his life. One evening, as the sky was painted with streaks of orange and gold, Daniel sat quietly on the balcony with Lucky nestled by his side. Before them, the city buzzed with vibrant sounds and shimmering lights. Yet, In that serene moment, it felt as if they were the only two beings in existence. Gently scratching behind Lucky's ears, Daniel's voice softened, heavy with feeling. "You know," he murmured, "I always believed that I rescued you that night. But the reality is, you rescued me. You restored my hope." Lucky gazed up at him with his bright, glowing eyes, pressing a paw gently against Daniel's chest, a gesture that had symbolized their connection from the very start. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes, not from sorrow or fear, but from deep gratitude. In that simple touch, he sensed everything: devotion, trust, love, and something even more profound: destiny. No matter what luck really meant, Daniel understood it was irrelevant. The world might never truly grasp their bond, but he no longer sought explanations. He had discovered something rare and extraordinary, something he was determined to protect. His heart swelled with conviction. Whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter what the future held, Daniel and Lucky would face them side by side. And as you, dear listener, ponder this tale, remember this truth: sometimes the most remarkable gifts appear in our lives when we least anticipate them. They may not fit neatly into the world's categories and might defy all logic, yet they have the power to change us in unimaginable ways. Daniel's life was forever changed the moment he brought that tiny pup home, and perhaps your own life awaits an incredible encounter just around the bend. If this narrative moved you, be sure to hit the like button, share it with someone who embraces the extraordinary, and subscribe to stay updated with more inspiring stories. Don't forget to activate the notification bell, because the next story could truly leave you awestruck. Remember, the most incredible stories aren't always those we seek out. Often, they come to us unexpectedly.